the colorful and dramatic regions of the Grand Circle in the U.S. Southwest, a spectacular collection of some of America's most diverse and dramatic landscapes, protected by world-famous national parks, as well as several state and tribal parks. This rugged and sparsely populated area is characterized by several isolated mountain ranges that rise from the vast high desert plains of the Colorado Plateau. This is primeval country, bare rock in all shades of red and yellow as far as the eyes can see, interrupted by otherworldly buttes and mesas, by scattered dune fields, and by an endless network of canyons. A stretch of land so rough and unnavigable that large parts remain mostly undeveloped to this day. In the middle of it all lie some of the most remote and isolated areas of the lower 48, a harsh and wild, yet strangely beautiful stretch of land that has been a symbol of the Wild West for ages, thanks to its dramatic sceneries and rich cultural history, ranging from pre-colonial civilizations to the iconic era of Route 66. This has created a dense concentration of world-renowned natural, as well as historic landmarks, and extremely popular tourist destinations that are scattered throughout this area. However, there also is a long list of destinations in this region that are well off the beaten track. The perfect place for all kinds of outdoor adventures, navigating the region's countless scenic roads and breathtaking backcountry trails by either car, by bike, by boat, or on foot. All of this offers exceptional chances to explore and experience some of America's wildest and most dramatic desert landscapes. In the following sections, I will take you along on a journey exploring this region's 8 national parks, as well as a collection of state and tribal parks and some true hidden gems, which I have visited several times over the past 10 years. During these visits, I have spent several weeks in the remote backcountry hiking and camping, and covered hundreds of miles on the region's most scenic drives. Based on this, I will highlight my personal top destinations, including the best times to visit, and will further describe my favorite scenic travel routes to explore the area. The Grand Circle is centered around the Four Corners region and covers large parts of Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado, further encompassing the entire area of the Navajo Nation Reservation, America's largest Indian reservation. There are 3 major travel routes serving much of the area. The most popular travel route in the region is Route 66, which has been replaced largely by I-40 and runs through northern New Mexico as well as northern Arizona. This route cuts through the southern portion of the Grand Circle area, connecting Albuquerque in New Mexico with Kingman in Arizona. The Route 66 theme is well preserved in most of the towns and villages along the way, with Holbrook, Flagstaff, and Seligman serving as major local hubs that offer countless photo opportunities, themed restaurants, and gift shops. Highways 191 and 89 are the 2 main routes running in a north-south direction, serving much of the Navajo Nation Reservation as well as northern Arizona and southern Utah. Along these routes lie many of the region's world-renowned natural highlights with Grand Canyon National Park, Antelope Canyon, and Zion National Park along Highway 89, and Monument Valley, Canyonlands National Park, and Arches National Park along Highway 191 being the most popular destinations. Besides those main routes, Highway 160, as well as Utah State routes 12 and 24, lead deeper into some of the less traveled regions of the Grand Circle. While Mesa Verde National Park, Capitol Reef National Park, and Bryce Canyon National Park are not located directly along one of the 3 major traffic arteries, a detour along Highway 160 or Utah State routes 12 and 24 to one of those parks is well worth the drive, as this leads into some of the more pristine desert areas that are off the beaten track. And this is also where some of the region's true hidden gems are situated, with several state parks that are considerably less crowded than the likes of Arches or Grand Canyon, but offer no less dramatic sceneries. Covering large parts of northern Arizona, as well as portions of western New Mexico, southwestern Colorado, and southeastern Utah, the Navajo Nation Reservation, the largest reservation within the US, along with several smaller reservations in and around it, make up a vast area containing numerous cultural landmarks, as well as sparsely populated, beautiful landscapes. Here, a combination of national and tribal parks protect a variety of rugged canyons and impressive rock formations, including both world-renowned destinations as well as well-kept secrets that are off the beaten track. This is native land, filled with history. Most of the settlements within the reservations are small towns such as Kayenta or Chelly, which offer almost all basic services. The largest settlements in the area lie just outside or in between the reservations, with Farmington in New Mexico, Cortez in Colorado, and Holbrook or Page in Arizona. The area outside the region's native tribal lands is characterized by colorful high desert plains and the Grand Canyon. If that's not enough, this part of the Grand Circle further offers dense forests, towering mountains, and vast open grasslands, making for a surprisingly diverse mix of landscapes that are protected by a variety of national parks, national monuments, and state parks. Besides the pristine desert landscapes and alpine mountain sceneries, this area is well known for some of the most popular and picturesque historic places from the golden era of the legendary Route 66, with many of them located in the towns of Holbrook, Williams, and Seligman. Along the Utah border in the northern section of the Navajo Nation lies the most popular destination of the Four Corners region. Monument Valley is most notable for its distinct buttes and mesas that rise from the rugged valley floor, surrounded by sand dunes and vast, open desert plains. This is the ultimate Wild West scenery, which has been the dramatic setting of a number of Hollywood movies. With numerous viewpoints scattered across the landscape, which have been named after film characters and celebrities, this is one of the most iconic natural landmarks of the US Southwest. The valley is part of a large and rugged drainage basin along the San Juan River to its north, which includes the Valley of the Gods in southern Utah, and is filled with dramatically eroded rock formations. The entire basin stretches across 4 states encompassing much of the Four Corners region, and is characterized by vast distances, grand views, and long, straight highways that run all the way to the horizon. All of this is set in the middle of a dramatically sunburnt, intensely red desert. I have visited this park once in the spring of 2022 and have passed through this valley several times in the following years. There is a sense of endless freedom combined with an odd mix of adventurous excitement and oppressive melancholy that I feel every time I return to this desolate yet beautifully barren part of the high desert. The long drive from virtually anywhere in order to get here always culminates in the exhilarating anticipation of finally arriving at this otherworldly place once the first buttes become visible in the far distance. However, if you stay long enough and are able to fully immerse yourself in this harsh land full of heat, wind, and dust, you feel how hostile this supposed beauty actually is, and how small you become in the middle of this endless and eerily quiet stretch of land. A mysterious feeling that I could not shake ever since I first visited the region. During that first visit, I made my way out east from Page as part of one of my first road trips through the Grand Circle region and set up camp for one night in one of the park's cabins along the western rim of the valley. It has been a long drive and a very hot day that late spring when I finally arrived. The views towards the east were spectacular, with the sun-lit buttes of the Monument Valley glowing dramatically as the sun went down. Beyond the buttes, the views across the vast, open desert reached as far as southern Colorado's snow-covered peaks, more than 160 kilometers out east. These extreme dimensions, the silence, the heat, the isolation, and those vast distances seemed incredibly stunning, yet overwhelmingly incomprehensible at the same time. The next morning, the weather was quite windy when I set out for a relatively short and easy hike along the Wildcat Trail, a 6-kilometer loop trail leading down into the valley and around the West Mitten Butte. Although the hike was quite strenuous with strong winds and sand blowing everywhere, the scenery at the bottom of the valley was absolutely worth it. Once I was back, I took to the roughly 20-kilometer loop along the Monument Valley Scenic Drive. Among the highlights were the scenic John Ford Point, with its unparalleled views of the Mittens and the distinct totem pole formation. One of the most iconic viewpoints, however, was situated outside the park along Highway 163, roughly 26 kilometers north of the park's entrance. Featured prominently in the Hollywood movie Forrest Gump viewpoint was one of the busiest spots in the entire valley. But the scenery was absolutely worth it, both from the viewpoint itself and on the drive down the highway towards the valley. The highway running straight for miles all the way to the towering mesas made for a spectacular photo opportunity. One of the lesser-known destinations within the Navajo Nation and the Four Corners region, Canyon de Chelly, offers a grand scenery that is off the beaten track and seems worlds away from the large crowds at Monument Valley up north or Petrified Forest National Park down south. However, with its combination of ancient Native American archaeological and historic sites, spectacular overlooks, and dramatic canyons and rock formations, Canyon de Chelly is just as impressive as its popular neighbors. Like much of the region's tribal lands, the surrounding landscape is characterized by vast open desert plains that are cut off by mesas and steep cliffs. A remote region that is a long drive from almost anywhere via rough roads and through isolated stretches of land, which is why there are considerably fewer crowds out here. I have visited the area twice, once in the summer of 23 and again in the fall of 24, setting up camp at nearby Thunderbird Lodge both times. From there, I set out to explore the many overlooks along the South Rim. My absolute highlight was when I set out to watch the sunset from the Spider Rock overlook at the far end of the paved park road. This was by far the most spectacular viewpoint of the entire national monument, with massive rock spires rising almost 250 meters from the bottom of the canyon, and a maze of side canyons spreading out into the distance all around it. Watching the rock spires change their color in the light of the setting sun against the backdrop of towering storm clouds racing by in the far distance remains one of my personal highlights of the US Southwest. In the far southwestern corner of Colorado, bordering and partially overlapping with the Ute Mountain Reservation, lies Mesa Verde National Park. The Mesa Verde Formation is a large mesa that rises from the Montezuma Valley and is situated just south of the town of Cortez. The top of the mesa consists of a heavily eroded plateau with countless ravines and canyons cutting through the vast open plains. Much of Mesa Verde lies on the tribal lands of the Ute, with Mesa Verde National Park making up the northeastern section of the formation. One of the major destinations of the Four Corners region, Mesa Verde, along with Monument Valley and Canyon de Chelly, protects a large collection of ancient Native American cultural and historic sites, with numerous well-preserved cliff dwellings of the Pueblo culture, which once lived all across the Four Corners region. This makes Mesa Verde National Park somewhat unique within the National Park Service system, as it is the only national park within the US that has been established to primarily protect cultural historic sites. This is where one of the largest concentrations of some of the best preserved ancestral and archaeological sites in all of the US Southwest can be found. When I visited the park in the late summer of 22, my absolute highlights were the impressive cliff dwellings clinging to the steep cliffs and hidden underneath rock overhangs or inside the caves in between the canyon walls. Isolated from the outside world and well protected from harsh weather and potential invaders, these structures were spectacular sights considering the fact that they have been planned and constructed in some of the most inaccessible places roughly 1,000 years ago. The most impressive of them all was Cliff Palace, the largest cliff dwelling in North America, which kind of resembled a miniature replica of a modern city with its skyline of multi-story buildings, all of which are framed by a gigantic overhanging cliff. One of the top highlights in the Four Corners for some extensive sightseeing adventures. During one of my most recent visits through the area, I drove along Interstate 40 from Chambers, Arizona towards California as part of my Fall 24 road trip from South Dakota's Black Hills to Los Angeles. This was the perfect opportunity to explore Petrified Forest National Park, a place that I've been meaning to see for a long time. Unfortunately, this park has always been just a little bit too far out of the way for me, being roughly 3 to 4 hours from Albuquerque or Phoenix and about 2 hours from Flagstaff. However, since its northern entrance station and visitor center are both located right along I-40, this park is in fact one of the easiest accessible national parks of the Grand Circle and therefore makes for a perfect detour when traveling through the area. Petrified Forest National Park protects an incredibly colorful part of northern Arizona's high desert plains, containing extensive badlands and, most notably, those vast basins filled to the brim with fossilized trees. The northern entrance station, which is situated right at the exit of I-40, marks the beginning of the 45-kilometer drive along the park's paved main road. The northern section of the park is characterized by the badlands of the Painted Desert, which consist of brightly colored and striped sedimentary rocks that have been eroded into countless buttes and hills as far as the eyes can see. However, in my opinion, the most impressive part of the park starts roughly 30 kilometers from the northern entrance with Jasper Forest, Crystal Forest, and Rainbow Forest, which contain vast fields full of petrified trees. Walking along the short loop trails into these forests of crystallized fossils, I couldn't believe my eyes how large and fully intact some of those tree trunks were. Here I was standing amongst those giant and brightly colorful rocks that had clearly visible growth rings and a perfectly intact layer of petrified bark. The texture was just like that of a living tree. A surreal experience, trying to comprehend that this was an actual living organism that did not look much different hundreds of millions of years ago. Flagstaff is situated in the very heart of northern Arizona, right at the foothills of the prominent San Francisco peaks, which are visible from up to 160 kilometers away in the mostly flat and barren surrounding high desert. The area in and around Flagstaff therefore offers a variety of outdoor destinations, in addition to countless cultural and historic sites for Route 66 fans. While the surrounding areas east, west, and north of the mountains are mostly characterized by vast open desert and prairie-like plains, Flagstaff and the San Francisco peaks are situated in the middle of dense forests and green pastures, which makes for a stark contrast when traveling through the area. Here, landscapes will change entirely within minutes. During my visit in the spring of 2022, I passed through Sedona and the scenic Oak Creek Canyon, which is situated about halfway in between Flagstaff and Sedona. Sedona marks the incredibly colorful southern escarpment of the Colorado Plateau and lies roughly 1,000 meters lower than Flagstaff. This means a considerably warmer climate year-round. However, the most notable characteristic of Sedona is its scenery, which is characterized by towering, brightly colored cliffs and mesas. The red and orange colors are as intense as hardly anywhere else, and the surrounding mesas and rugged cliffs of the nearby southern escarpment of the Colorado Plateau are filled with dramatically rugged rock formations of all shapes and forms, which makes for perfect photo opportunities. In the winter of '24, I was traveling from Phoenix to Page and stopped at the Sunset Crater Volcano National Monument to enjoy the pristine snow-covered alpine scenery. Both the Sunset Crater volcano as well as the San Francisco peaks are the result of volcanic activities in the region, which has created the highest peaks of Arizona, as well as a vast area covered by lava fields and cinder cones. When I visited the area inside the Sunset Crater Volcano National Monument in the early January of '24, it was a bright and sunny winter day with strong winds and freezing temperatures. There were dense pine forests mixing with vast lava fields, which started opening up on all sides the further I traveled into the park, a primeval volcanic landscape set in the middle of a pristine mountain wilderness. One of the most popular parks in the National Park Service system, and a symbol of the natural beauty of the American Southwest, Grand Canyon National Park truly stands out. The bright colors and vast distances of one of the 7 natural wonders of the world make for those world-renowned views that attract millions of visitors each year. While the vast dimensions of the Grand Canyon cannot be comprehended, the sheer numbers are still impressive. Over the course of 6 million years, the Colorado River has carved this 446-kilometer long, up to 29-kilometer wide, and over 1,800-meter deep canyon into the Colorado Plateau, thus exposing 2 billion years of our Earth's geological history. To put this into perspective, a hike from the high elevations along the upper rim all the way down to the bottom of the canyon leads through a total of 5 climate zones. While those facts are impressive to read, they mean nothing when standing at the edge right along the drop-off into this entirely different world below. It is that strange sensation of being overwhelmed by something that just cannot be comprehended, let alone be described by words. Yet those dramatic colors, the rugged cliffs, and that calming stillness of it all is simply beautiful. Ever since I have first visited the south rim of Grand Canyon National Park, I have returned several times, only to experience a completely different atmosphere each time I return. While it has been the south rim that I have returned to time and time again, the Grand Canyon has always presented itself differently depending on the weather, the time of day, and the time of the year. The very first time I visited the Grand Canyon was when I first traveled through the US Southwest during the monsoon season of 2013. After my first failed attempt to experience the Grand Canyon in all its colorful glory, I gave it a second try 9 years later in the spring of 2022 and again in the winter of 2024. During both of those visits, I started my journey in Flagstaff and made my way up the Desert View Drive towards the park's east entrance. And both times the weather was just perfect, with strong and freezing winds and clear sunny skies. I braced for a glorious sunset as I approached the Grand Canyon from the east during my second visit. It was late afternoon, and the entire surrounding landscape was already covered in a bright yellow light by the low sun as I drove past the Little Colorado River Gorge. After finally reaching the national park boundary, I headed west for the hotel and the nearby viewpoints. And there it was, already visible from the road, the seemingly endless depths of the canyon with its bright warm colors. I caught my very first sunset over the Grand Canyon standing near Mather Point. As I was standing there right at the edge of the south rim, looking along the rim trail, looking eastward and watching the shadows slowly rising from the depths of the canyon as the sun started to set behind me. The bright orange and red colors of the canyon walls gradually changed into a dark purple before being swallowed up entirely by the dark. The next day I took on the rim trail from the aptly named Ooh-Ah Point all the way to Hopi Point, a beautiful hike of roughly 15 kilometers that led me past Mather Point, Yavapai Point, the Grand Canyon Village, Maricopa Point, and countless other beautiful unnamed spots along the way, with plenty of room to escape from the crowds and to enjoy the Grand Canyon all by myself. During my most recent visit to the Grand Canyon in late January of 2024, I returned to the exact same spots that I had visited 2 years before, adding some of the viewpoints along the eastern section of the South Rim to my itinerary, including the Desert View Watchtower and Grand View Point. With just the higher elevations inside the canyon near the upper rim being covered by snow and the warmer climate down below, keeping the canyon frost-free, Grand Canyon during the winter was just as bright and colorful as during the summer, with the little added bonus of a white rim all along the edges, which made for a beautiful atmosphere. After all these visits, I cannot say which overlook is the best or what distinct feature makes the Grand Canyon most beautiful. There are some things that I myself started to appreciate quite soon, such as the beautiful sunsets which I got to witness at Mather Point, or experiencing some peace and quiet at some of the less crowded spots along the rim trail. I also noticed how some viewpoints offered better and mostly unobstructed views of the Colorado River far below in the canyon, like for example Hopi Point, Moran Point, or the Desert View Watchtower. And for those brave enough to head out into the freezing Grand Canyon nights, experiencing the crystal clear night skies at any one of the viewpoints can make for some great memories. Page is northern Arizona's major tourist hub, conveniently located in between the Grand Canyon, the Grand Staircase with all its colorful national parks, and the dramatic destinations of the Four Corners region. There also are a number of world-renowned, as well as some lesser-known natural landmarks right at the doorstep of this busy desert town. The most popular natural landmarks are Antelope Canyon, which is part of the Navajo Tribal Park system, and Horseshoe Bend. Because of that, Page can be quite busy and expensive, especially around the peak seasons of spring and fall. I visited Page in the spring of 2022 when I set up camp right here for 2 nights, and again in the winter of 2024 when I passed through on my way from Grand Canyon to Bryce Canyon in southern Utah. There is not much to the town itself except for the large selection of hotels and restaurants. The main attraction is the surrounding picture-perfect high desert landscape. About an hour south of Page, Lee's Ferry marks a historic section along the Colorado River in between Glen Canyon to its north and the Grand Canyon to its south. A unique stretch of land and one of just a few opportunities in Arizona to experience the Colorado River up close. When I visited this spot in the spring of 2022, I enjoyed the serenity of this place, even though it was quite busy with river rafters at the time. There were wild horses roaming the opposite side of the river, and the calm and frigid waters made for a beautiful contrast against the backdrop of the steep cliffs of nearby Glen Canyon, just a little further upstream. While this area was a little out of the way for me coming from Page, the drive here was as scenic as it gets, leading past impressively colorful towering cliffs, dramatic viewpoints high above the river, and through spectacular desert landscapes. So, all in all, a worthwhile detour if there is enough time to spare. Just a little further upstream, high above the depths of Glen Canyon, Horseshoe Bend probably is the most popular and busy outdoor destination near Page. The parking lot is roughly 10 kilometers outside Page, located right along Highway 89. Due to the popularity of Horseshoe Bend, there are fees charged at the parking lot. From there, it is a short walk about 800 meters along an out-and-back trail that leads right to the rim. During my first visit to Page in the spring of 2022, I made my way out there to check out one of the most iconic viewpoints all along the Colorado River. Standing right at the edge, I was surprised to see how steep and deep the drop-off actually was, and how I was able to walk right up to it, with no fences or barriers anywhere. Looking straight down into the abyss, more than 300 meters deep and more than 1.5 kilometers wide, was an incredible and strangely mesmerizing feeling.